The foreign minister of Russia is blaming U.S. officials for stoking fears of a potential nuclear war. Sergei Lavrov says nuclear war is, quote, not in the heads of Russians, instead accusing Western politicians of spreading nuclear rhetoric. His statements come one day after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin's own rhetoric on nuclear weapons. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby also announced Wednesday the U.S. would postpone a test missile launch to prevent further exacerbating tensions. Putin placed his country's nuclear deterrence forces on high alert Sunday. The Russian leader said he ordered the elevation because of, quote, aggressive statements made against Russia by NATO. But a U.S. official denied Russia was ever threatened by the organization. The U.S. and Russia have about 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, with about 4,000 warheads each. Joining us now with more on this is Robert Litwak. He is the Senior Vice President and Director of International Security Studies for the Wilson Center, which conducts and promotes objective research to inform the public policy debate. Robert, how likely do you think we are that this Russia invasion of Ukraine could escalate into a nuclear war?
The Ukraine war has been conducted under a nuclear shadow, with Putin's alerting of raising the alert status of Russian nuclear forces. The Biden administration has responded with restraint. It has not responded in kind by elevating the alert status of U.S. nuclear forces. It abstained from the missile test that your colleague referred to of the Minuteman III missile, so that it could not be interpreted as bringing U.S. strategic nuclear assets into the Ukraine equation. And finally, President Biden has eschewed any possible military moves which would bring the United States in direct confrontation potentially with the Russians, such as the establishment of a no-fly zone. This restraint, I think, is appropriate so that we don't climb the escalatory ladder with Russia.
And then you have the Russian foreign minister accusing the U.S. of exacerbating fears of nuclear war, even though Russia is now the country on high alert and, of course, is waging a war on NATO's doorstep. Why are they blaming the U.S. for spreading nuclear rhetoric here?
Well, it's rhetorical posturing. They've upped the ante rhetorically and in practice with the Russian nuclear alert. Although U.S. officials, I believe, have said they've not operationally seen any change in the status of Russian nuclear forces, which is good. I think that an alternative interpretation of the Russian move and the rhetoric is essentially to lay down a marker that the United States and its NATO partners should abstain from involvement in the Ukraine war. There was a historical precedent in 1973 during the Middle East War. The United States elevated its nuclear force status as a signal to the then Soviet Union not to become militarily involved in the Middle East War. But the risks are there, primarily misperception and miscalculation that could lead to inadvertent escalation. And the escalation is of two types. The type we're talking about here, which is analysts call vertical escalation, going from conventional to nuclear, but there's also horizontal escalation, that the conflict could geographically expand beyond Ukraine to the peripheral states, some of which are members of NATO, the Baltic states, Poland, Romania. These are real risks. They can be mitigated, they can be managed. A key element to that is establishing a line of communication with the Russians, which is difficult in the middle of a conflict and a war, but it's necessary for strategic stability reasons. But also, I think in terms of the immediate conflict, is for diplomacy to kick in on a possible off-ramp for this war.
All right, Robert Litwak, thank you very much for your time and insight, sir.
You're welcome.